good is this? Thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to our panel. Let's get straight into it. Andrew, you challenged us to stop optimizing inside inherited constraints. Great presentation, by the way. I like a good spicy chat early in the morning. It was fantastic, so congratulations. You told us breakthroughs, they don't start by asking, what do farmers want? They start by noticing what everyone assumes can't change. You argued Australia isn't behind, that we're early, and pressure forces us to rethink the system. And you left us with a confronting idea. This is that the most advanced systems in the world are often constrained by decisions that no one remembers asking. And let's test that right now. If the box is optional, why are we still designing inside it? If Australia sees the future of farming first, why don't we dominate globally? And if the real constraint isn't technology, what is it? That's where we're going now, a conversation not about whether we have good ideas, we all know that we do. It's about whether we've built a system capable of turning these ideas into impact at scale. We all know Australian agriculture is a success story, but let's talk about levelling it up. Andrew, I'll start with you first. You challenged the D in R&D, the commercialisation gap. We'll go to you and then to the rest of the panel. What's the single biggest structural barrier preventing Australian research from reaching actual users? What would you blow up tomorrow to fix it?
I'd have to say the university research system. We have great researchers do some great work, but what really matters is that research able to be made to a product market fit and gotten through to industry. So if that was going to blow up one thing, it'd be the way that research is funded in Australia, and I'd untie that from development.
Jen, what about for you? And feel free to, as well, if you disagree vehemently, which you might.
No, I agree completely. I think that we do need to rethink how research is incentivised and how it's rewarded. I guess we've been trying to mature across our ag research leads the world. We're recognised around the world for our ag research. But globally, research is measured traditionally for decades, actually for centuries, by publications. So this fits in the model that Andrew was just talking about. Why do we measure research by publications? I think it's an important way to make research accessible to people, but mainly to other researchers to progress the field. I think there are other ways to make research accessible. And I guess thinking about this, as the pace of technology and science speeds up exponentially, you know, there's conversations that Moore's law is dead, it is dead, I think we need to think again about how we do research, and it needs to be much more end-to-end, much more collaborative, and recognise that there's just a bunch of skill sets along that pathway. There's science, there's technologists, there's entrepreneurs, there's development, there's extension, and no one professional sector in Australia can do that on its own. So this teaming concept needs to happen. And so, just as Andrew says, like if you start a piece of science or technology without the end in mind or that team that's going to get it to the end, then you're probably not quite aware of that full impact pathway.
Yeah. George, what about for you? Apart from maybe rival labs, for example, rival startups, what would you be blowing up tomorrow?
I guess I sort of disagree somewhat with the research comment. I think that's more of a symptom of a deeper cultural issue we have in Australia, which is we don't celebrate failure. And Andrew, you and I have spoken about this a lot. Like, how many times over the course of building Swarm Farm have you had people that have sort of looked down their nose or told you can't do it from where you are, or that kind of like, when someone looks at you and you can see that it's relishing waiting for you to fail so that they can tell you I told you so. Like, that's the core cultural issue. It's very, very hard. I don't have a innovation system. We don't have an innovation culture that embraces risk and tolerates failure very well. And that then trickles down into our research system. We do the easy thing, we measure the easy thing, we encourage the easy thing of publications because they're quantitative, they're measurable, and frankly, you don't have to take a risk to do them. And then that sort of filters throughout. And so The thing which I would be blowing up is having both leaders of our government, leaders of our industry, leaders in our media that are encouraging and celebrating risk and failure, especially you, Swanee. Yeah, and celebrate it. Don't jump on it.
The panel. Kate, perspective on this?
I'm very similar. I think it's the Australian attitude to success. And I grew up in the UK, and I was sold the Australia that was Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan. I was sold the surfboarders and the snowboarders that were, really dangerous risk takers. It was the guy jumping out the plane, the bronze people running along beaches. And then coming to Australia, we actually have to accept we're a really risk-averse culture. We really behave. We do the right thing. We've got a dichotomy between our outward-going persona and who we actually are as a broader society. And I think we've got to change that. We've got to lean into our big, bold, brave persona that we paint. It's certainly among us as individuals, but it's not there as a collective culture. And I think that's something that I would love to see blow up. We can do it to our sporting heroes and look at the wonderful job our Olympians are doing right now in Italy. We're not doing it to our tech leaders. We're not doing it to the people who are actually fundamentally changing Australia for the better, creating jobs, creating prosperity. It doesn't take away from what our sporting leaders are doing, but it's time we step up and realise who are the role models we want for our country.
And I will remind everyone, scan the QR code up on the screen there. There is shit research and great research, so it's true. And if you want to, whatever comment you'd like to make, S words are allowed clearly. So feel free to comment if you like. Kate, I might follow up, and then others might want to weigh as well. And in your role particularly, but more broadly, when you look at ag tech compared to SaaS, compared to fintech, do you think politicians, the public more broadly, grasp the stakes, or are we treating ag like a legacy industry? Thanks. Great.
I think there's a challenge around how tech as a sector is perceived in Australia, and we really need to dive down and think about what is our tech sector and where does it stand out. The reality is our strongest tech sector is business-to-business software. That is Atlassian, Canva, CultureAmp, Aconex. It's all these companies that have done amazingly good work and built phenomenal global companies that are widely recognized. Our tech sector should represent our economy, and agriculture is a huge part of our economy, and therefore we should have a phenomenal ag tech sector. And I think that's something that we're on a journey, and kudos to AgriFutures and the work of the RDCs, Agriculture Victoria, and many others across the country who are really driving this. At LaunchVic, my day job, we've seen a 200% increase in ag tech startups in Victoria over the last 4 or 5 years. It's growing. But we should be dominating globally as an ag tech leader, and we're not quite there from a startup perspective. We are certainly recognised as an agricultural powerhouse, but I think there's a lot more to do as we think about the technologies and see more swarm companies coming to market, because we do have a phenomenal cohort of truly global companies coming along the pipeline, and it would be great to see us widely recognised for our B2B SaaS, but also for our ag tech companies.
Yeah, I might get George and Andrew, I guess, are you being treated, do you feel, by investors, by others, compared to a SaaS business or, an AI business, God forbid? Maybe Andrew, start with you, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Just say that one again, sorry.
When you frame what your business is doing, do you think you're being treated differently compared to if you'd started a software business or an AI business that was just, when you're having these conversations with investors or maybe politicians or others?
Yeah, I've probably got a different spin on that. I think I was on a think tank after VOCAG last year, and we had a lot of different ag business in there, and we had representatives from sugarcane and cotton and grain and beef and all the different ag sectors around the country. We're all talking about how do we lift productivity, how do we lift our GDP in agriculture, and every thought leader said, we need ag tech to lift the yield, to get more efficient, use less water, less fertiliser, sustainability. And everyone said we need ag tech, but no one said, what about ag tech as an export industry of its own? What if the ag tech industry, what if we had some leaders, some champions in ag tech that built an industry that's bigger than the entire sugarcane industry in Australia on its own? What if that brought export dollars back into this country that gets reinvested here and helps not only grow our own industry, but develops a technology that brings expertise, income, brings revenue back into the country. And I sort of thought that was the missed point. So that's probably the bit I think about. on
George,
these
you might have a
opportunities.
perspective?
I guess we're in a slightly different boat. I'm not sure how many people know what VOW does, but we're
Maybe explain, yeah.
so we're a cultured meat company. We grow meat directly from animal cells. We've done all of our development, research development, and production in Sydney. And we're the only company globally that's commercial, full stop. So on market in Australia and over in Asia as well. We've been very fortunate. We're backed by 2 of the 3 largest venture funds in Australia. We have a lot of really good international investors, and we've been able to attract a lot of really good talent. So we've been extremely fortunate. I do feel like we got very, very lucky to have a couple of very strong investors that back us very, very early, and we would definitely not have been able to achieve any of this without that. And it does sort of feel like there's this interesting kind of division in Australia. Either you sort of get into a certain class of capital allocators, and if you're in that class, there's an ability to capitalize and build great businesses here. But if you're not sort of within that class of the top 3 to 5 venture funds, it's very hard to capitalize a capital-heavy business like us as an advanced manufacturer. And if one thing hadn't happened back in 2019, which was Blackbird backing us at a pre-seed, is we would have died or we would have moved to the US. And we got very, very lucky that one sort of fork in the road went the right direction. And we have been able to do this research development and commercialization locally.
Interesting. And just a quick follow-up on that, do you feel like, and you guys, the whole panel will probably have an opinion on this, when you're competing against Silicon Valley, Singapore, etc., for talent, for researchers, for engineers, etc., what's the pitch to make them come to, whether that's Australia more broadly, Victoria, what's the pitch to keep them here rather than saying, go spread your wings and be in Silicon Valley, for example? I'll start with you, George, but I'm sure everyone would have an opinion on Australia's competitive advantage or otherwise.
Yeah, so we've hired a lot internationally. So in my immediate leadership team, 5 of 6 of my immediate leaders are either based overseas or moved to Australia for the role. So pretty much all of our senior leaders, all of our key engineers came from overseas. Both my CTO and principal design engineer are both from the SpaceX Starship program, because that's really one of the very few places globally where you have fast iteration on large complex hardware. The pitch to them is 3 things. The first is Sydney. I believe Sydney is one of the best cities in the world to live in, and I think it's a very, very important way to attract people. The second is working on something which is meaningful and difficult, where there's some it's not durability, it's sort of like less of that hype chasing, which you do find a little bit of in Silicon Valley, where it's like whatever is hot, people kind of move to, and like just whatever, a lot gets left behind. And then the third is just that kind of focus, like being away from the noise and being able to focus on one thing and just kind of put your head down, I think is something that they've really gravitated towards. But it's definitely as much Australia as a lifestyle destination as it is the company as well.
Okay, do you have thoughts on, and we probably have you probably have thoughts on George's Sydney comments too.
I am paid to promote Victoria, and it's a wonderful city that rivals Sydney any day of the week, especially when it's 33 degrees outside. But I think it is Australia. It actually goes back to the wonderful bronze people running along beaches, the Aussie active, the sporting culture. We have a phenomenal lifestyle. Add food on top of that, and a lot of the cultural activities that go on. We've got major events and festivals like the Grand Prix, like the Australian Open, etc. They all play a really big role in promoting Australia as a really livable place. I also think, again, it's going back to having a really vibrant tech community here, that people see it as a place where you can go and build a global career. And as we've built a really fantastic tech sector with a number of unicorns that are really, truly globally recognized, we are beginning to be recognized as a place that you can go and have a phenomenal tech career that and a better lifestyle than some other destinations around the world. I think there's a lot more work for us to do as a nation here in building that attraction story, making sure that we're not only attracting the best and brightest from around the world, but we're retaining the best and brightest that are here. And making sure for those founders that don't have the luck of having a Blackbird and are at that fork, they've got other opportunities and other alternate investors who are just as likely to keep them here on shore and build great global businesses from this country.
Can I throw in a left field thought of something which I think is very underrated as part of our attraction story? So this is kind of out there, but I think compulsory voting is one of the single most important things that keeps our politics centrist, which is actually a really big part of why I'm finding people are choosing to move here, is they view truly compulsory voting as like a really key attribute of what makes Australia an attractive place to live.
It's funny that if you look at the list of countries, that it's not a good list. There's like Australia and then our company of the other countries that also have possible. It's like, oh, yikes. Yeah. But again, we can pick that up. It's good chat left for later. Jen, I wanted to ask you something. CSIRO does research, but the commercialisation bit, as it's well known, Australia often does rank poorly on the C, commercialisation. Is it a problem that our researchers don't want to be entrepreneurs, or have we built a system that actively punishes them for trying? And what are some solutions or ways that we should think about maybe solving that just poor commercialisation ranking that Australia often has?
Yeah, so first of all, I think research is really key, and that's shown globally that nations that invest in research fill that knowledge gap, have technology resilience, but also technology leadership. So I think that's key. And we rate quite high in the OECD for research outputs. I guess in CSIRO, we've moved to measuring research by, value at the farm gate. So I think there's been a real shift in terms of what value at farm gate for dollar research invested, what's the return? And we have hit more than $120 return for each dollar invested at the farm gate. So that's a really key measure, and I think drives that connection. But to your question, I guess there's a range of things happening. Yes, it takes 10 to 15 years to become a researcher in a given field, and some of that has to grow through the life of the career. And so generally, researchers start out in universities, and they have that built experience to get eminence in their field, and to start to deliver that to industry is a really important process. I think researchers are increasingly incentivised to deliver, and I think we're building that muscle really strongly. But they participate on a global stage with and punch above their weight. And so to participate in a global stage, then there's a range of different metrics they have to meet. So I guess I'm circling back to the point that it takes a team. I think when I first moved back to Australia, there was this big push to turn scientists into entrepreneurs. I think it's really important for scientists to recognise industry needs, to think about that problem, to not pick up a pen until they understand it deeply. I think that's important. But to expect all scientists to be entrepreneurs, I think, is a little bit naive. You can have that; they're rare, but entrepreneurship is a skill, and bringing development and extension is a skill. And I think we can't expect scientists to span all of that, but we should expect them to participate as part of a team.
Yeah. David, can I add to that? Because I sat on the strategic examination of R&D review last year, and this was a topic that came up time and time again. And I think we think that researchers need to be entrepreneurs, and to Jen's point, they don't. In America, only 10% of all technology startups across all sectors are spun out of universities. 90% are being run by entrepreneurs who are average age 42 years old and have got at least 10 years business experience. In Victoria, it's only 4%. We only at Launch Vic, we only look at Victoria figures, but it's 4%. So there's a lot of work that could be done there, but it's not to say it's the be-all and end-all. The average entrepreneur in Victoria is 42 years old. If you're over 50 years old, you're twice as likely to be a woman being an entrepreneur than you are as a man. So we really need to think about what an entrepreneur is, and it is a skill set, and it is a group of people that we've got to be able to activate, and it's not researchers sitting in a laboratory necessarily. The other thing I'd say is that's not to diminish research. There are thousands of entrepreneurs that are innovating in AI today. If it hadn't have been for over 50 years of research done by our phenomenal universities around the world in AI, they would not be innovating. So we need the two to coexist, but it's not a linear pathway from one to the other. And I think that does get lost in the debate in Australia, and we're expecting SARA and universities to be churning out great unicorns. That's not what we want. We want them churning out great talent, and if some of them happen to be unicorn leaders, that's fantastic. We want them building the next 30, 50, 100 years of knowledge that we as entrepreneurs and innovators can go away and leverage and build on. And that's the magic of our research sector.
Yeah, I've got a bit to add as well. I had a lot to add last year. I said R&D shouldn't go together. They're like oysters and custard. We use this word R&D. We're funding R&D. We need R&D for the beef industry. We need R&D for the seafood industry. We should say we need research or we need development, but we should never say R&D and generalise it. Research is discoveries new to science, breakthroughs, publications, discovery of new things, fantastic work, and there's fantastic researchers here. Development is finding a product market fit. It's going to industry and working out, can this research be used, or are we looking for a solution are we looking for a problem for a solution we just created? It's the entrepreneurs, the development that actually take something and take it to an industry that can break those invisible barriers, that can actually take something and be commercialised. And so if we don't split out R&D, if we stop saying R&D, Andrew. If we don't split R from D and start talking about what D we're funding, completely separate conversation to our R. Some people like oysters and custard mixed together. It can happen. And as you said, there are some unicorn researchers that also develop something through to being a product and commercialise it. And that'll be extension will come in and extend it. But most people don't like oysters mixed with custard. It's just not the best mix. But it can work. But I think we've really got to have those conversations in industry about, are we really backing the D for this? Because if we don't back the D, we're not going to get there.
I wanted to ask you too, are we still designing tech and innovation for farmers instead of with them? And what do you think might change if farmers were treated more as co-innovators rather than end users? And others might have opinions too, but Andrew, I wanted to start with you.
I just don't think there's any other way to do it, is there? I mean, we've always been farm first. All of our technology developed on farm with farmers, immersed in farms, and I find it weird to think there's a world where that isn't the case. But that's just me.
Yeah. Kate, you might have some.
Well, I would add you would find out pretty quickly you're not going very far, very fast if you don't do that. I mean, it's like designing a hospital without patients, isn't it? It's you have to do that. Even your first problem choice has to come from the industry and be validated by the industry. Otherwise, it's you're chasing the wrong problem. Yeah.
Are you seeing though? Are investors, are people? There's a point that just came up on the screen. Are we sort of being too? It might be an Australia-wide problem, but are we being too city-centric in some of these discussions? Whether that's investors, others, and not giving the regions the true attention that they deserve. I don't know who might want to jump in there. Okay, maybe.
I'm happy to jump in on investors. I think it's investment, and particularly early stage capital, has been a real problem in Australia for a long time. And that definitely goes to the ag tech sector. We in Victoria have done a lot of work around building the investment community through activities like Breakthrough Victoria, but also at Launch Vic and bringing new venture capital funds to market. I think one of the things that we've noticed through a lot of our investor work is, one, there's a problem with people with capital, family offices, high net worth individuals, being prepared to take high risks as the first check investor, because for the vast majority of companies, it's not a venture capital fund, it's angel investors. So we need more angel investors. Secondly, you throw in hardware and they start getting even more uncertain. And then you throw in seasonality of agriculture, and a lot of them run for the hills. And so we have a huge swathe of angel investors that will not accept they will only want to stick to their software that they know and love. They know the business models. They really don't know and understand hardware, and then they get really gun shy when you throw in seasonality, climate change, etc. So there's a big education piece that we've got to, as a sector, give investors the confidence to understand what the opportunity is, because there is a phenomenal opportunity in agricultural investment, and we're starting to see that through some of the work we're doing at LaunchVic. But I think there's a long way to go to build a really vibrant agricultural investment venture capital market. Big shout out to Tenacious and Mandalay, who've really led the way for early stage venture. But gosh, I think we need 10 or 15 of those sorts of teams around the place to really build the sort of ag tech sector that I think Australia is capable of doing, and if it wants to stand truly on the world stage, needs.
There was a fair point on the screen about what we can actually do to change our risk-averse culture, what material things we might be able to do. I know the media has its own role to play, obviously. Do any of you have sort of concrete things? I know, like, the education sector, for example, in terms of what we're teaching kids has a role, but anyone have any thoughts of what we could materially do to fix tall poppy, fix this risk-averse culture we seem to have a little bit?
I think there are some green shoots and some good things. Like, if you look at things like GRDC with their Grain Innovate program, it took courage to do that. And, that's one of our backers, and I see other companies being backed there. And I've seen some statistics out there about the performance of what that's driving for our industry. The dollars in versus what it's doing at the farm gate is outperforming traditional research in places, which is phenomenal. I see the horticulture industry doing the same thing. I've seen the cotton industry doing the same thing. And there's other programs out there. The Hinkler Ag Tech Initiative at Bundaberg funded pure development for companies to get a product market fit. It was phenomenal. So there's some really good things happening out there, and it's good to see innovation and people breaking the rules down, I think, on how we can get more development and things out there. I think it's fantastic.
George, I wanted to ask you, if a 18-year-old comes up to you and says, I want to do what you did, I want to start a company in deep tech, would you sort of recommend it, and what advice would you give maybe privately in terms of just doing what you've done, which is incredibly impressive?
I would not recommend it, is the honest answer. I think I get a lot of founders that approach me, and there's something very attractive about working in a capital-intensive manufacturing industry that has big technical barriers to overcome. I think there's a little bit of envy of young people in Australia when they look to something like the US that has these incredible hardware startups and these very speculative companies like OpenAI, which can just wander off into research for half a decade and come out with something totally game-changing. The reality of building a company like Vow is so, and I'm sure Swarm Farm is the same, is so grueling and so hard, and there's so many things that are working against you doing it in Australia. If an 18-year-old comes up to me and says, hey, I really want to do this, I'd say, move to the Bay Area, go to a place where there is that culture, there is that risk capital, and the sort of reputational consequence of something not working is low or even negative. There's a benefit in having worked on something which doesn't work over there. Go and spend some time there, learn, cut your teeth, come back in 10 years when you do have that experience, and then build here. It's a very, very difficult place to get a manufacturing startup off the ground, full stop. And I don't believe it's the best place to learn the skills to do that.
Quick follow-up, is that fixable, or can we improve that?
Yes, but it is going to require a lot of leadership. And it's at every level. And I think it's been really interesting. Recently, we've been approached by a provincial government in China. They want us to set up a factory there. And the experience I have no idea if I'm going to do it for the record, but the experience of that's been really interesting. You go over, you get this menu of government support. 4 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, we had 30 government representatives in a building with the construction crew. They're going through how they can fit it out for us. Yeah. The enormous amount of capital they'll put behind it, the talent they'll put behind it, the training program the local university will run for us. The US they have a very, very developed private risk capital sector. And so if you want to do something in this space, there are countries which have really organized an ecosystem around that. And if we want to do that in Australia, I think we need Prime Minister and federal government really saying this is a national priority and having stability in that being a national priority. And that needs to filter all the way down to the local council and how they zone and how they approve stuff. And, all the little things, like which in year number 2 of getting a water main upgrade, it's just like all of those little things add up to taking a lot of focus away from the core thing, which is building technology and getting that into the hands of the people that want it. And so if we do want to make that a priority, it has to be a steady, stable national priority that is led absolutely from the top and consistent through all layers of government. And that's going to require a pretty significant and very drastic shift in leadership.
Okay, Kate, then Andrew.
I completely agree. And I think it's really, I find it very disheartening when I hear brilliant founders like George talking about advising other people to go offshore. We have to fix this because Australia is worse off if we don't have Andrew and George in our country doing what they're doing.
Andrew?
Yeah, I have a different outlook. We bootstrapped for 10 years before we raised any investment money. And when I was working with the university projects years ago, they used to say, you're just a farmer, you couldn't commercialise this. We need a John Deere, or we need, someone who knows ag technology. And that was the attitude that was pushed upon me. When we manufacture in-house, we started manufacturing, every investor walked away and said, we're not touching manufacturing. If you're building shit, you're screwed. And it's like, I like building stuff in my shed. We built our first 130 robots in our farm workshop with a gravel floor. We concreted by the end, but we've now built a world-class manufacturing facility in Toowoomba, and we built 100 robots last year. And we're celebrating, going, holy shit, we built 130 on the gravel floor back at Bendy, at Gindi, a population 400 people in the middle of nowhere, before we built, 100 in the new facility in a year. I look back, and that journey has hardened us and taught us things, and now we have the IP around manufacturing. So there's different ways and different paths. They're both valid. When we go to overseas markets, we spend time in market, we learn the markets. Other people pay consultants to teach them about the market. We thought we needed to learn the lessons ourselves, so we spend time over there. So there's different valid paths to this. And not saying one's right or wrong, but both can be successful.
Jen, maybe just to wrap up, how do we create more Georges, Andrews in Australia, or at least keep them here?
Yeah, well, I think we celebrate them, we back them, we tell their stories, and I think to Andrew's point's valid. It is a tough journey, but it's a tough journey here as well as internationally. In Australia, we do have the ingredients to, we're doing agriculture and climates that the rest of the world are going to face in the next few years. We're there already, and they're talking about how can they farm in conditions that are plus 2 degrees for them that we call summer here. So, we have the ingredients to lead the world with this, and just sort of pointing to those ingredients and pointing to those pathways, I think, and defining what risk is. Like, there's many flavours of risk. Some of it can be removed, and some of it is just, facing up to the fact. I think it was in the MC opening around the context. There's a massive risk in doing nothing. And I think we need to understand that as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. We're out of time. We're all going to be around if you want to grill us further. That's very risky, myself saying that, but we're all going to stick around for morning tea. So come chat to us, and if you could all thank our panel.